Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be the Gameweek 37 transfer plans, and it's a little bit of a sad one because of course this might be the final transfer plans of the FPL season for 23-24, but we've had a great year so far, and of course with these sort of up and downs this season, I'm very happy to say that we've finally had a very strong game week for once, and what feels like basically a downhill slope for unfortunately the last 15 game weeks, I would say. And ultimately, we got 123 points all out. Obviously, Man United are still to play. I'm recording this video right now at Sunday evening. United still have to play Crystal Palace away from home. We still need to find out about, the sort of status of Bruno's injury and so on and so forth. As far as my team, though, obviously, I said that Flecken would be a huge differential for me. He absolutely bailed me out this week. I think Fulham actually had a lot of chances in the second half, but I was pretty fortunate in that 3 p.m. game to have Flecken, bail me out. Him and Reguilon consistently getting a lot of FPL points in the back half of this FPL season. Quite a crazy swing if you think about how well Flecken has done just recently, to be honest, compared to, that early part of the season where you can see he was just struggling for points desperately. And I think when we look back historically at a team like Brentford in the 2 seasons past, particularly when Raya was playing there too, we did see that they were consistently a top defense. So it's nice to see that Flecken, of course, has enjoyed some points and that the Brentford defense has also gotten some results compared to, of course, them over conceding goals. And of course, an indication of that too is Flecken just generally not saving shots earlier in the season. But that's averaged out a little bit in our favor in the second half. So that's really fortunate. As far as obviously where I am rank wise, I'm at 2,646 in the world. As I said, I do expect the rank to drop. Hopefully, it shouldn't drop back down to something like 5,000 in the world. I'm hoping that we've climbed back quite securely into the top 5,000. Hopefully we can stay there and consolidate maybe around 3,000, 4,000 in the world. And then with the bench boost next week, we can push on. So that's the sentiment right now. I think another big benefit when I look at my team, of course, is compared to the wildcarders, I think a lot of people have recently moved back into white. So I'm a little bit behind in the sense that I think white is better than Saliba as an asset, but that's okay. I think I can't really afford to make a side grade move from Saliba to white. So, I mean, even if you look back at the game that Saliba had versus Bournemouth, he was actually with an exquisite goal scoring chance as well. So, a good game from Saliba anyways. And he's still a very stable pick. So I'm very happy that I can own Saliba, that he'll be part of the bench boost for Game Week 37, but also going to be one of the key players for Game Week 38, hopefully, as long as he's available for that. With Guardiola, one of the nice benefits of not wildcarding, in my opinion, is that a lot of people who probably wildcarded went into Ederson and Petrovic. And Petrovic has, of course, done incredibly, but Guardiola has obviously outperformed Ederson, his counterpart. And I feel very happy that I went for Guardiola a couple of weeks back. If you guys remember, I did take him into my team for a hit. And since then, he's basically become a brilliant attacker. But not just really just the goals and assists, but just when you look at him in possession, how comfortable he is passing out of the back, progressing into basically a left wing position, allowing the winger to invert. And how comfortable really he is with both feet in possession. Not just the fact that he can score with his right foot, but really just how comfortable he is just passing with 2 feet, which is honestly something that's so rare for, defenders in football. And it just shows that he really is a bit of a diamond right now. I think my opinion on the wild card was probably for people to go for Ederson for safety reasons. But given that we only have 2 game weeks left, I do think that the people who are in the position of having a wild card can definitely look at Guardiola if they own Ederson and just say that if you don't have any injury issues, or even if you do have an injury issue, presumably that injury issues is a Van Heck, is a Maguire, is a Schär. And you can probably replace that injury issue with Guardiola and then also maybe replace Ederson at the same time. And those 2 free transfers could be actually quite well spent in being able to get access to someone as great as Guardiola. And the sad thing, I suppose, with Game Week 37 is I'm no longer assuming that Guardiola is going to be a bit of a differential now. I think a lot of people will be taking hits to get to Guardiola, and I think that's justified because you're expecting that, particularly with Arsenal, hopefully being able to beat United in Game Week 37, that Guardiola is going to play the next 3 games as one of the key cogs of this Man City team. And so, the chances that he's getting game to game, it's not just the fact that he's scored, for example, like in the Nottingham Forest game where you can just say it's just a set piece. The reality is he's just consistently getting to great positions. And I think I'm a lot more confident in Guardiola now in terms of his minutes. But I think we've always sort of seen that he's a great attacking player to get, whenever you pick from a City defender, because usually they are a little bit dull. particularly since you kind of have to, I mean, since Cancelo at least, you've had to go for a lot of centre backs from City. And, with the exception to Stones, he still kind of plays a little bit more of a marshalling midfield role, as opposed to something that Guardiola does at times, where he does get into more interesting spots, in my opinion, particularly if he is, the final man on the wing, for example, looking for a cutback and things like that. In the midfield, Saka once again bailed us out. In hindsight, of course, I think Salah did extremely well this game week. And of course, we did take hits to get into Foden, to get into players like Gordon, but I really don't regret it at all. And especially even with the sort of Son transfer as well. Because when I think about it, ultimately, I'd probably have to take a hit for Salah at one point in time. I needed Salah to be a cash cow for me, and that allowed me to make multiple transfers for my team. So I'm not too regretful about Salah doing well this week. I think we expected him to do well, to be honest, as long as he was going to start versus a very, very poor defensive team in Tottenham. And I'm talking about a poor defensive team in Tottenham. And I think people will be, of course, questioning the transfer plans. But the reality is, fixtures are fixtures at time in FPL. Liverpool are a brilliant attacking team. So are City. Of course, Tottenham do still have City to play, but we'll talk about that in a moment. As far as, owning Foden and Gordon, I'm very comfortable owning Foden and Gordon. I also played Gordon over Son in the end, and I really have no regrets over the decision to do that. I thought Son had a fair few chances versus Liverpool in the second half, but let's be honest, Liverpool also completely killed off the game, I would say. And of course, Spurs had a little bit more life when the substitutions came on. And you can argue, of course, that overall the performance from Spurs has been better, at least, than compared to, let's say, the Newcastle performance, where they were just overwhelmed for 90 minutes, or even the Chelsea one. So a little bit of improvement from Spurs, which is nice considering we're probably going to move into quote unquote Spurs attacking assets. And a lot of people will be thinking about Richarlison too, but I don't think that Richarlison is 100% essential for a team in my position, right? Because unfortunately, the only player that I can take out of my team to go into Richarlison is Bukayo Saka, and I really just don't want to make that transfer at all. I think that there is going to be potential Richarlison benchings that we can see, because he's clearly not, 100% match fit, or he's not, with the sort of fitness to actually play 90 minutes left. And the way I see it is he could start very well the Burnley fixture. Maybe he gets benched for City, but if he plays for City as well, maybe he doesn't start versus Sheffield United. And I don't think I just have enough guarantees with Richarlison over the next 3 fixtures. Although I do think that he does belong in Spurs' the sort of best team, considering that Werner's out as well. So that's something to think about. But for me, in my position, maybe if I was wildcarding in 35 and I already had a Spurs midfielder, I would be tempted to go Richarlison. But for now, I'm really not that confident about that move. As far as Foden and Gordon, as I said, going back to these two players, I just think they're brilliant for Gameweek 37 and even Gameweek 38. With Gordon, maybe less so. I don't think he's necessarily an option that I have to play in Gameweek 38. What's nice about having 8 attackers, of course, in the front line and the midfield is that ultimately I can bench someone like Gordon Gameweek 38. One point to mention about Gordon is that a lot of people have talked about the away discussion about Gordon, and I just think that the reality is Gordon, with the 2 away fixtures that we're going to play him for, which is obviously going to be this week where we had the Burnley fixture, and then also next week where we've got Man United away, is that these are bottom 5 defenses, right? Burnley is a poor defense, particularly a poor set-piece defense. United just lost Maguire, and they only really I think they only are expected to be worse. As far as Newcastle, of course, we know that they've had an incredible drop-off, home and away, but it's still remains to be seen that Newcastle are a completely horrific attacking team. When you look at their away numbers, they're still, I would say, close to being a little bit more of a mid-table attack than they are, a bottom 3, bottom 4 attack. So I just think that it's a little bit overblown, the narrative on Gordon. I'm fully aware that he's only had 3 attacking returns all season long, and I've done some looking into his underlying stats as well. The numbers for Newcastle and Gordon basically suggest that they are, half the attack. And as I said, what's nice, of course, is that when you look at Burnley and you look at United, whenever you're supposed to judge the defensive strength of the opposing team, you always have to take that into account, right? And even though Newcastle's offense away from home is much worse, you're always going to be bolstered by the boost of naturally playing versus a bottom 5 defense. And that's just my thoughts on Gordon and why I'm very happy to play and keep Gordon within my team for Gameweek 37. As far as Palmer, of course, nothing to mention. Jackson as well. As I said, I was very, very confident that this is the fixture. This is Jackson's best fixture of the season, as I said in some of my videos last week. And the reality is I think it was borne out, right? West Ham have been a bottom 3 defense all season long, and it actually makes sense to play Jackson here. It was never between Gordon, Jackson, and Son. It was always for me between Gordon and Son. So I'm 1 point down, but I'm going to have to blame Alexander Isak for that, for missing a penalty, even though he scored literally 2 minutes after that without getting a Gordon assist. But, we take that on the chin and we just move on. With Haaland, I think a lot of people have been doing a lot of hindsighting around captaincy. Look, ultimately, this is one of Haaland's greatest hauls within the Premier League. Was he the best captain on paper? I would say probably yes, just based on things like goal scoring odds, etc., etc. But I don't blame anyone for going against Haaland. Going against Haaland has worked out very well for a lot of managers this season. So this is obviously a tough opportunity, in my opinion, when you look at it, where Palmer had a great game, Saka had a great game on paper, and ultimately it might not have paid out so well, even if you, let's say, went for other City picks as well. The same logic stands there. So I don't really blame anyone for going against Haaland captaincy, but of course I understand that the outcome is absolutely brutal. But I think, if you're a manager who decided to do that and you were fully aware of the risks, I just think that, don't try to take it too hard. Things like this are quite brutal in FPL from time to time. We've all made that quote unquote mistake. I wouldn't even necessarily label it a mistake. I think if you're trying to chase and you recognize that there's 2 to 3 game weeks left in the season, this is the time to do it, because you just don't have that many game weeks left to make differential decisions. And I respect, obviously, the decision that managers have taken, if they went for a different captaincy. And that's all I'm going to say on the Haaland captaincy. However, it does, of course, give us a little bit of confidence boost when it comes to captaincy in Game Week 37, 38, particularly when we watch West Ham and how Jackson basically had a feast for West Ham too. So I think the captaincy might have to stay on Haaland for a while longer. However, going to the rest of the news of the team, so I think with Gusto, what we saw with it in the Chelsea game was that he actually came off the bench and he was a surprise sort of part of the squad, I would say, and he came on before Alfie Gilchrist came on, Gilchrist, sorry. And you can see that, of course, Gusto probably is fit enough to maybe start one fixture in Game Week 37. My concern, though, is that I think with Cucurella playing so well, and as you can see in the last few matches, that the innovation, quote unquote, of Cucurella inverting in that second half versus Aston Villa, I think has worked out really well for Chelsea. And he's been playing some really good football too. The Tottenham game is a particular highlight. I was actually watching it live with FPL Sonaldo, so that was really fun. And FPL Trophy Mo, if anyone knows him as well. But what I would say is that it is concerning that someone like Chalobah or even Disasi could technically play right back again. And maybe if you think that it gives Chelsea a little bit more of a solidified team, playing out of the back, that maybe Gusto could miss out one of these fixtures, considering as well that he needs to build his fitness once again, given that he's been out for 2 weeks. That is a genuine concern. I really am not seeing this week as an opportunity to play Gusto twice, right? To have him start twice. So the way I see it is, when I'm looking at my bench boost, it's really between Flecken and Gusto as to, who is the second free transfer that I'm going to be using to get out of my team. So why not have a look at, what my transfer plans are for this week. So obviously, I'm in a nice position where I've got a lot of money in the bank, but I also am in a weird spot of not actually knowing what to spend the money in the bank for. Gusto, as I said, is someone that I think that I'm going to keep, because if I was to, let's say, compare Flecken and Gusto, Flecken ultimately has Bournemouth away, and Gusto, in my opinion, has 2 similar levels of fixtures, right? Because Nottingham Forest, you can argue, have a lot to fight for. It's also an away fixture. With Brighton, we saw an improved performance versus Aston Villa, but also not too many chances being quite serious about Brighton recently. The offense has looked poor. So I would say, obviously, in terms of the quality of the teams, they're not crazily good offenses, right? Considering Brighton's form and considering the overall performance of Nottingham Forest this season, particularly under Nuno. So I would say that I'm pretty confident that Gusto starts one game. And just on that basis, I kind of like playing Gusto over Flecken. If I can guarantee, for example, 1 appearance point on one game and then starting on another game where he's got, in my opinion, probably a slightly higher chance of getting a clean sheet compared to Flecken. So the way I see it, Flecken has to go. And then Pau Torres is a must go. So with Pau Torres, I think the easiest and most simple transfer is to go for Pedro Porro. I know a lot of people are going to look into my team and say, you've got double Spurs defense, doesn't make any sense. And you might be right, but I think the sad thing is that my front line is completely secure. My midfield also feels completely secure because I don't want to do the hokey cokey with Saka into Richarlison. So a defender has to come in, and the defender has to come from either Newcastle, Spurs, Brighton, or Man United. And with Man United, with Maguire out, I just really do not believe in a defender, even Dallo, for example. We've talked about how Dalot has really subpar attacking stats, and even Maguire at one point had higher threat than him. I'm just generally concerned at how bad the defense will be, without Maguire as well, considering they have a lot of defensive injuries. As far as, let's say, a Newcastle defender, I like the idea of Dan Burn, that's for sure. But I think the question about Dan Burn is, does he have similar levels of upside to a goalkeeper, or does he have more? And since I already have Vicario, it's not like I have a like-for-like comparison. If I go out of Flecken, I think there's a world where I can actually go for Nick Pope as well, which makes me think that if I can go for Nick Pope, I'd much rather go for Porro and Pope. And then going back to, let's say, Brighton, I think they actually also have some horrific fixtures, and they've just generally been very poor, with exception to the Aston Villa game. But I don't think that's going to necessarily, swerve my head around what I feel about Brighton as a team. Because for me, if you look at a player like Dunk, who's probably the most interesting defender from this team right now, ultimately you're just looking at an aerial threat, right? I do think that facing Newcastle away from home is just going to be so tough. We know that this Newcastle offense is an absolute behemoth. Chelsea as well have found a lot of form, whether it's away from home, which is obviously going to be, a slightly more muted Chelsea team. I just don't see the value of really going for Dunk. And that's pretty much why I'm going to swerve Dunk as well. And with Verbruggen, I don't think I have the confidence that he plays 2 fixtures, so that's that. So it really becomes a question of, I think, me going for Porro and then going for Pope as well. Or, of course, I ignore Porro because maybe I don't have the confidence that Pope plays. And then I actually go instead for someone like Onana as well. Because I think if I was to pick between United and Brighton, who would I actually think has better fixtures and more security? I would still say it's Onana right now. Despite obviously the amount of defensive injuries that United have. It's just that Verbruggen could very well get rotated one game, and that would just completely ruin the transfer. So I like right now, preemptively speaking, just going for Pope and Pedro Porro. And Gameweek 38, I don't really want to talk about it because with Gameweek 38, as I said, I really think that it's one of those deadlines where there's just going to be so many leaks. We don't know how the title race will change. We don't know how European spots will change after Gameweek 37 culminates. It's better to just keep with the one free transfer open, not have any sort of set ideas, and then just understand that it's going to be a bit of a toss-up, a bit of a 50-50. Like last season, we had huge swings from Kane captaincy to Rashford captaincy to Salah captaincy. And I'm imagining that will happen again. But we will only really be able to make that sort of decision when we get the leaks and we are able to respond adequately then. So my thoughts right now on Gameweek 37 are to go for Porro. Going back to Porro, though, I think a lot of people will also say, what about going for Christian Romero, right? Who seems like the main set-piece threat for Spurs. I think Christian Romero is actually a very good pick, but if I was to, let's say, pick between Porro and Romero in isolation, and money wasn't something that I really cared about at all, which clearly is the case for my team, I think I would still land on going for Pedro Porro, right? He's still someone who, particularly since Maddison just doesn't have a lot of guaranteed minutes within the Spurs team, is someone who takes a lot of set pieces, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be Romero scoring. It could be Van de Ven scoring, but that would be a 50-50 if I was to choose between the center backs. Not to mention, of course, other people are perfectly capable of scoring. Richarlison, for example, included. Richarlison scored off a corner from Pedro Porro versus United, if you remember. So things like that can happen. I don't think just choosing one of the sort of potential threats is the right way to go. Why not get the person who's probably going to be offering most of that threat through the chance created? So I like Pedro Porro from that basis. In terms of Burnley as well, I tend to think that he is still the most interesting attacker in open play. So when you even compare it to, let's say, for example, the game today with Liverpool, not too many chances, right, for their defenders. And really it was still Pedro Porro who benefited the most. And because Maddison is out for so long, I just think that it is a huge plus. Right now, I'm just leaning towards Pedro Porro and Pope. But I really don't need to get news from Eddie Howe about Pope, because of course if it doesn't feel like Dubravka will be sort of seated on the bench for those 2 fixtures, I think I might go for Onana as well. Now, if there's a miraculous world where we find out that, somehow, some way that Trippier is available, I do kind of like the idea of maybe going out of the Pedro Porro business and going instead into something like Romero plus Trippier as well, because I can just about afford it right now. Obviously, Romero could get a price rise, which could really, really ruin my plans. But this could be a very efficient use of cash, and I would have to absolutely guarantee that Trippier starts both fixtures on Gameweek 37. So this would be on the express conditions that, Eddie Howe basically confirms Trippier is back. But as I said, I feel like the Trippier dream is no longer alive, and I'm very much leaning towards just going for Porro for the time being, and then actually not having Romero, keeping Gusto, and going out of Flecken to one keeper. So that's going to be the general transfer plan for this week, and I think it's a strong bench boost, right? Because when I, let's say, add back maybe Onana, who feels like the safer option right now because we don't have Pope news, at the end of the day, my bench boost is going to be 4 singlers, I would imagine. So I would say Gusto, I would count as a singler. Saliba, Gabriel, and Saka, who play versus United, but clearly have a very important fixture for them. And United just have been shocking, for the course of the season, really. But even recently, I don't think there's been any pickup in performance. If Bruno continues to be out, if he's out, that's a huge plus, I would say, for Arsenal defense. But anyways, you want to keep this Arsenal defense towards the end of the season. I think when you look at, for example, some of the single game weakers, they could be better than some of the doublers, right? For example, a Branthwaite, a Tarkowski, or maybe even a Gabriel could arguably all be better options than, let's say, a Brighton defender or even a United defender. Maybe not so a Newcastle defender, because I think Newcastle on balance have better fixtures than the other 2 teams that I've mentioned. But it's very close, and that's why there's the added value of keeping these Arsenal players for Gameweek 38, and I have no plans on really touching on them. So this is the bench boost. Having a triple Arsenal bench boost is something that I'm very happy to have. I think it worked out really well last season for some people who did a little bit of a cheeky bench boost before the more popular, I think, Gameweek 28 bench boost, or Gameweek 29 if I'm struggling to recall. But that's sort of my thoughts right now. Very happy, of course, with the general form of this Chelsea team. Hopefully Gusto can be a part of that, and hopefully I can enjoy some of it through Gusto. But that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening to the transfer plans. Hope you guys have had wonderful game weeks yourselves. Take care, goodbye, and I'll see you guys soon.